Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really digging into a case that's been shrouded in mystery and, frankly, misinformation for decades.
We are. We're looking at the disappearance of 16-year-old Nancy Wilcox from Holiday, Utah, back in 1974.
And our mission today, it's really specific, isn't it? We're trying to move past the usual focus on the killer.
Exactly. This isn't just another Ted Bundy story. We're using the original case files, the primary sources, to focus on Nancy herself, on the victim.
And on the investigative mistakes and the myths that have really clouded the truth for, 50 years now?
50 years. It's about correcting that record, focusing on the facts as they were known or should have been known.
Okay, so let's start with Nancy, because the picture the sources paint it's really important context for everything that went wrong later.
It is. We're talking fall 1974, Holiday, Utah. Nancy's 16, a junior at Olympus High School. And she's grounded, very stable.
Not someone you'd label as at risk or anything like that. She was involved, right?
Very. Juggling school, pretty demanding academics, apparently. She was active in her church. And she had a part-time job, too, as a waitress.
Just a typical busy teenager building her life.
Right. Physically, descriptions mention her being around 5'6", brown eyes. But here's the first little flag. Her hair color.
Ah, yeah, I saw that. It's listed differently depending on the source.
Brown, blonde, sometimes strawberry out blonde. It seems like a small detail, but
it hints at a lack of, consistency right from the start.
precisely. And that basic picture, stable, responsible, busy girl that should have screamed foul play immediately when she vanished.
But it didn't. And that's the core conflict here. That reality versus how the case was initially handled.
It was tragically overlooked. Which brings us right to that first critical misstep.
The runaway theory.
Yes. In those first crucial hours, maybe the first day or so after she went missing, October 1st, maybe October 2nd, law enforcement made the call. They classified Nancy Wilcox as a runaway.
And the family pushed back hard on that, didn't they?
Oh, absolutely. The sources are clear. They pleaded with the police. They laid out her routines, her commitments, her personality. They knew she wouldn't just leave.
But the label stuck anyway.
It did.
So procedurally, what does that actually mean? Back in '74, you label a missing kid a runaway. What happens next? Or maybe what doesn't happen?
Well, that's the key, isn't it? What doesn't happen? The urgency evaporates. It shifts from a potential crime scene, an abduction, to more of a social services issue, a family matter.
So fewer resources get assigned.
Drastically fewer. That critical first 48-hour window, when evidence is freshest, when witnesses remember details, it's essentially wasted.
No big media alerts, no task forces.
None of that. No major ground searches organized immediately. The case basically goes into a holding pattern, waiting for her to show up.
And the sources connect this inaction directly to what happened next, don't they? It created a sort of safety zone for the predator?
A terrifyingly direct line. No public warnings meant the community wasn't on alert. And this is right when Ted Bundy had just moved to Salt Lake City. He was starting law school there.
So the failure to sound the alarm gave him room to breathe, room to operate.
Exactly. An uncontested field, you could say. Nancy disappears around October 1st. For the next, 16 days, the official approach is passive. Wait and see.
And that was all the time he needed to start his spree.
It leads straight into what people now call the season of fear. Nancy's disappearance was the quiet start. But then things escalated. Fast.
Showing a clear pattern, right, even if it wasn't seen at the time.
A chillingly clear pattern, looking back. Just over 2 weeks after Nancy vanished, October 18th, Melissa Smith, 17, is taken from Midvale.
Her body was found later, wasn't it?
9 days later. She'd been bludgeoned, sexually assaulted. Horrific.
And then Halloween, October 31st.
Laura Aim, also 17, vanished from Lehigh. Her body wasn't found until Thanksgiving Day.
So within about a month, 3 teenage girls, similar ages, same geographical area along the Wasatch Front. All gone.
Vanished. But somehow, the dots weren't being connected publicly, or even, it seems, effectively within law enforcement across jurisdictions. Not yet.
It took a mistake on his part, didn't it? November 8th.
That was the turning point, November 8th. Bundy approached Carol DeRoch, 18 years old, at the Fashion Place Mall in Murray.
Using the police officer disguise?
Yes, the infamous Officer Roseland ruse. Claimed her car had been broken into, tried to lure her away, tried to handcuff her in his VW Bug.
But she fought back.
She did. Incredibly brave. She escaped and gave investigators the first solid description of the attacker, his car, his method. The specific method.
Finally something concrete, a real lead.
A huge break. But here's the truly chilling part. even after that close call, even with Derange escaping and raising the alarm.
He didn't stop, not even that night.
No. Later that same evening, he drove north to Bountiful. He abducted Debbie Kent, 17, from her high school parking lot during a school play.
Unbelievable. So even with a survivor's account circulating, he was still able to strike again just hours later.
It shows his audacity, his compulsion, and the lack of maybe immediate widespread communication across police departments.
And the disappearances didn't stop there either.
No, the fear continued into 1975. June 75, Susan Curtis, only 15, vanished from a conference at BYU in Provo. Her remains have never been found.
The pattern, age, location, it just screams serial predator.
Absolutely. But the breakthrough, the thing that actually stopped him, it didn't come from connecting Nancy's case or the early disappearances. It was reactive.
It came down to Carol Derange's escape and then luck.
Pretty much. Her testimony eventually led to an arrest, but only after Bundy was pulled over almost by chance. August 16, 1975, a Utah Highway Patrol officer stopped him in Granger during a routine check.
And the car search, that's when they found the kit.
The so-called kidnap kit. Ski mask, handcuffs, crowbar, rope, all the tools of his trade.
That was the physical proof. It backed up Derange's story and linked him tangibly to the MO.
Exactly. But think about it. It took nearly a year after Nancy vanished. Multiple other victims. The arrests came from a traffic stop, not from piecing together the pattern that started with Nancy Wilcox being dismissed as a runaway.
A catastrophic initial failure. And once he was caught, you argue that a different kind of failure started, the Bundy shadow.
Yes. This is where the notoriety of the killer starts to warp the actual facts of the case. It happens all the time, but it's particularly stark here.
The victim's eclipse, you called it, where the sensational story pushes out the maybe less exciting but true details.
Precisely. And folklore replaces fact. Let's tackle the biggest piece of folklore first. The Volkswagen sighting.
Right. This is everywhere in early reports, even some later ones. Nancy was last seen getting into a yellow VW Bug. Connects her right to Bundy's known vehicle. Seems neat.
Almost too neat. It fits the narrative perfectly. Makes it seem like they knew early on.
But the case files tell a different story.
Completely different. That tip. It didn't come in on the day she disappeared or even that week. It came in 2 months later.
2 months?
Yes. And the witness said they saw a girl who looked like Nancy getting into a VW. But the crucial part is, the witness later spoke to investigators again and clarified. They confirmed it was not Nancy Wilcox they saw.
So the lead was investigated and officially debunked by the witness themselves.
Correct. But the correction never got the same traction as the initial convenient story. The myth fit Bundy's MO, so it survived, even though it was wrong. The truth got buried.
That's incredibly frustrating. It speaks to how easily misinformation can set in concrete around these cases.
It really does. And the next myth is maybe even more damaging because it erases something real that happened to Nancy.
The story that Bundy stalked her at her waitress job?
Yeah, that narrative suggests this prolonged predatory focus on her, from Bundy specifically, building up to the abduction.
But the sources indicate something else entirely, something about a previous incident.
Yes. This is where things get conflated. The files show that months before she disappeared, back in the summer of '74, Nancy was the victim of a sexual assault. It involved a different man, apparently a customer, who had harassed her at the restaurant where she worked. And importantly, Nancy reported it. She filed a police report about that assault.
So she had already experienced a trauma and she'd reported it, and that man wasn't Bundy.
Correct. The man she reported was investigated. And we know definitively from things like credit card receipts and established timelines that Ted Bundy wasn't even in Utah at the time of that summer assault. He was still in Washington state.
So the folklore completely merged two separate terrible events and attributed the earlier assault to Bundy.
Effectively, yes. Bundy's massive dark shadow just sort of absorbed her actual separate trauma. Her own experience, her bravery in reporting it got erased and rewritten as part of the Bundy legend. It's a profound injustice to her memory.
And this ties back to what you said earlier about the systemic issues, the inconsistencies in basic data.
It fits perfectly. If official databases like the Utah Bureau of Criminal Identification, the Doe Network, NAMUS, couldn't even agree for years on the exact date she went missing, October 1st or 2nd, or her hair color. Well, it created an environment where these kinds of inaccuracies and myths could easily take root and persist.
Because there wasn't a solid, consistent, factual baseline being maintained or communicated.
Exactly. When the official record itself is messy, the folklore has fertile ground. Now, thankfully, the Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office has made efforts recently to update their cold case information online to try and correct some of these long-standing errors,
That's good to hear, but it took decades. Decades where the wrong story was circulating.
which just hammers home the need for rigorous, ongoing cold case management. It's not just about solving it. It's about maintaining the integrity of the facts.
Let's move to the end game, such as it was, the confession. This happened just before Bundy's execution in January 1989.
Right. Detective Dennis Couch, who had worked the Utah cases, went to Florida State Prison. It was a last-ditch effort, often called the Bundy Summit, to get answers, particularly about locating remains.
And Bundy did confess to Nancy's murder.
He did. He admitted abducting and killing her. He gave some details. Said he saw her walking on a, quote, poorly lit main roadway in Holiday, forced her into an orchard nearby, then into his car.
And
Then he claimed he drove her to his apartment in Salt Lake City and held her there for about 24 hours before killing her.
so on the surface, that solves the who. After years of suspicion, it's confirmed.
It solved the whodunit, yes,
Yeah.
officially. But the confession became this final, cruel twist of the knife.
Because of the location, or lack thereof.
Exactly. His vagueness about where he left her body was, well, it was pure manipulation. When Couch pressed him for where Nancy's remains were, Bundy directed them to Capitol Reef National Park,
Which is nowhere near Holiday or Salt Lake City, right?
hundreds of miles south. It's a vast, rugged, incredibly difficult area to search.
Why would he do that? Just to be cruel.
It seems that way. It was strategic cruelty. By naming a plausible-sounding but huge and remote location, he could seem cooperative, satisfy the legal need for a confession perhaps, but ultimately deny the family any real closure. No recovery, no burial.
It basically guaranteed she wouldn't be found easily, if ever.
Right. It locked the case in this state of permanent irresolution. Despite searches, her body has never been recovered. So the confession solved the case, but simultaneously inflicted this lasting pain.
A final act of control. Of psychological torture, really.
It really was. And that enduring pain, that lack of resolution, that's what defines this case for the family. Nancy's sister, Susie Nelson, said it so powerfully. Something like, it's always there. Every day you think about it, it'll never go away.
And they had to fight battles on two fronts, didn't they? First, against the runaway label.
Which was insulting and damaging.
And then against all the Bundy folklore that basically overshadowed Nancy herself. For 50 years. So today, officially, what's the status?
The case filed 745445 is technically still open. It's now handled by the Unified Police Department of Greater Salt Lake. Nancy is classified as an involuntary missing person. She's listed in NAMUS.
And Bundy remains the only suspect.
The only credible suspect, absolutely. But without recovering her remains, the case can't be formally closed. It just stays in this limbo.
So after digging through all this, the files, the myths, what's the main takeaway for someone listening to this?
I think the Wilcox case is just this incredibly stark warning. The truth of a cold case, especially one involving a notorious offender, it doesn't live in the legend. It doesn't live in the easy, sensational stories.
It lives in the files.
It lives in the primary source documents, and it requires constantly going back, re-examining them with fresh eyes, challenging the accepted narrative. In this case, the files show that a failure right at the beginning opened the door for so much horror.
And maybe the work now is about correcting that record, debunking those myths like the VW sighting, the stalking story. That feels like the most meaningful thing we can do for Nancy now.
I completely agree. It's about reclaiming her story, putting the focus back on the vibrant 16-year-old girl, the one who was stable, loved, had plans, and who was even brave enough to report a previous assault, putting her back at the center, not the killer.
So the final thought, maybe, the thing to leave people mulling over?
It's this. When we talk about justice for victims in these infamous cases, maybe it's not just about catching the killer. Maybe the more enduring justice is actively defending the victim's true story, their actual life, from being distorted or erased by the killer's fame.
Because sometimes the truth is inconvenient to the legend.
Exactly. And if a fact feels inconvenient, if it messes up the neat narrative, that's probably the fact you need to pay the most attention to, because those inconvenient facts are often the only ones that truly matter.